Hi, my name is Ben Hales, and this is the fourth part of an exclusive video series for TournamentPokerEdge.com, looking at how to use Hold'em Manager 2. In this video and the next two videos, I'm going to turn my attention to the Hold'em Manager reports and filters. As a coach, I spend a lot of time analyzing player statistics within Hold'em Manager 2 and using the information to spot areas where a player can make improvements to his or her game. These reports and filters are hugely important coaching and analysis tools, and as with most things, the more effort you put in, the more you'll get out of it. I know many players underutilize Hold'em Manager 2 because they are unaware of certain features, perhaps slightly daunted by the prospect of trying to use the technology, or sometimes simply because they are unwilling to invest enough time in it. I think I will be able to help out most of you to some degree, even if you are already a proficient user. Please feel free too to leave comments, feedback, or observations on any of my videos at Tournament Poker Edge. From the home menu in Hold'em Manager 2, click on the Reports tab here, and ensure you have Tournament and not Cash selected in the top left corner here. Your player name is displayed here, so if you play on different sites with different names, you can switch between them using this drop-down arrow. You'll also find the same menu located here. You can select a different player's name by clicking Select Player. This is useful for doing in-depth analysis of an opponent. Watch as I select a random player. Any open reports now reload for that player, and that player permanently appears on my list of player names. I can now delete him from my list by editing the list, selecting him, and removing him from the list. I then reload my own player. Okay, that took about 10 seconds whilst I paused the video for Hold'em Manager to combine those two usernames into one player alias and load up the over 600,000 hands. Not a bad amount of time to wait. Now I can run reports off which pertain to both sites simultaneously. This is a fantastic feature for any of you playing across multiple sites. Before, when I clicked on the Edit Aliases button, like this, the settings window popped up. Let me close this now and show you how to get here from the more obvious place on the main dashboard. I click on Settings, and a whole bunch of HM2 settings appear, most of which I've never needed to use, but some of which I will be returning to again to show you a few more interesting features. In the General Settings submenu, look at the section on Time. You can adjust the start of day to fit your time zone in the world. This is useful when running reports for a specific time period. If you played a tournament on a Wednesday morning and you wanted to find it, but HM2 thinks it was played on a Tuesday evening, it could confuse you, so I recommend adjusting this if necessary. The start of the week can also be set from Sunday or Monday. Another thing I recommend doing for the purposes of keeping accurate accounts of profit and loss is to update any rakeback on bonuses you receive. So in the appropriate submenu here, click the green plus arrow to add, and you'll need to add a description here, the name of your player at each different site, and the percentage that you're receiving, and then click on OK, and in here it will give you a summary of your deal. That is then added to your database and it affects your net profits. On a similar note, if you buy in different currencies, keep the exchange rates updated here. Okay, let's get cracking and look at some reports and filters. There must always be at least one report open. You can have multiple reports open which will appear in tabs across the screen here. Broadly speaking, the screen is divided into three sections. At the top is the dashboard of menus. In the middle, the reports themselves, And at the bottom, a list of hands appears. You can make this bigger by dragging this up and down, and you can adjust the size of the rows of these report columns. You can customize this a little bit as you see fit. I've got the window small for the purposes of recording the video, but you can of course maximize the screen and have this very, very large. On the dashboard at the top, the More Reports button is located here, and this is where you come to add a report. I'm going to look at each report in order, starting with the first one, which I've already loaded here, the By Site report, by poker site. This report is useful for you if you are using an alias, as it breaks down your performance by each site. You might want to see whether you are performing better at one site than at another. Notice I've only got my PokerStars loaded up right now, so it's only giving me information for one site. I've also added a date range filter for just this year. To do this, you go to the date range button here and you set your appropriate range. You can use a standard range, or you can customize a specific date range by clicking here. As you can see, this report tells me how many tournaments I have played, winnings, ROI, in the money, and a breakdown of my finish positions. It's a useful summary report. As with all the reports in Hold'em Manager 2, you can add statistics to it using the Stats button here. You can also add filters to refine your data, and aside from the More Filters button located here, there are 3 other ways of filtering data on the dashboard. We've already looked at one, the date range here. This is a special kind of filter. There's also the game type at the bottom here. This is going to be useful for those of you who play different formats of the game. I only play No Limit Hold'em, so there's no need for me to change this one. Finally, there's the tags over here. Each tournament is tagged by Hold'em Manager 2 as a specific type of tournament. Let's say I wanted to look at specifically how well I've performed at 6 max 3 table SNGs with 18 players. I'd come here, click on this particular filter, and watch how the data has now reduced to just 2 games, showing that I've only played 2 of these this year. If I remove this filter by selecting None, all the games reappear. The normal place to add filters is, unsurprisingly, the More Filters button, which, when I click it, brings up a frighteningly complex window with 9 submenus on the left-hand side. I'll be looking at these in detail as we go along. For now, let's add a filter to show just 6-player tournaments. For that, I stay in the Tournament Filter submenu, which deals with the type and structure of tournaments as well as stack sizes. I go to the Number of Players filter and select the drop-down arrow here, which has greater than, less than, equal to, or between. I choose equal to, type in 6, and I then need to press the green plus sign here. You have to do this each and every time you confirm a filter. Now, in the top right-hand corner, there is a list of applied filters, and you can see the one I have added is now there. If I exit the More Filters window by clicking OK at the bottom, I now return to the report screen to view my filtered data. Any filters which are active appear in the orange bar across the screen. This includes the date range and the game types, but strangely it doesn't include the information from the tournament tags or stack sizes. To clear all filters, including any tournament tags, but excluding the date range, you simply click Clear Filters here. Now all the filters have been removed except the date range. The refresh button is located here. This is largely unnecessary unless in the general settings box here you have this auto refresh box unchecked. There are just two final buttons I've not discussed on the main dashboard. Firstly, the hand importing button here. Hands import automatically into Holdem Manager 2, so there's rarely going to be a cause to use this. But if I open the window, you can see that it is possible to manually import hands here and to adjust settings to the auto import feature, which runs very smoothly in my experience. If you are having problems, or perhaps you're running more than one database on your computer, it might be necessary to come in here and do some tweaking. To illustrate the use of the final button on the dashboard, I need to open a second report. So let's open the CBET continuation bet success report here. You'll notice that by default the report appears with a date range of all dates or any date. So any filters which are applied to other open reports do not automatically get applied to the new report which we've just opened. Nor do any new filters that I add to one report get applied to any of the other open reports. If I do want to apply the same filters from the first report to the second report, I click back on the By Poker Site report and then click Apply to All Reports. This button here applies filters across all the other open reports. If you look at the bottom, it now states applying, and now it's done it. So I can now click back and it will now say this year. If you consider this to be quite cumbersome, you can go to the general settings here and tick this box here, auto apply filter changes to all reports. Personally, I do like to have this button ticked, as most of the times I apply filters, I'm happy to have them on all my open reports. But if you have got lots of complex reports open with different filters on that you're still using, you might prefer to leave this unchecked. Note also that you can check this box to clear filters so that when you clear the filters it does not clear the date filter. I prefer when I clear filters that it does clear the date filter, so I'm going to leave it unchecked, but you might turn this one on. Now let's look at the CBET success report and how to use it. Your ideal CBET percentage probably lies somewhere between 65 and 80%. For tight aggressive preflop players, it should be slightly higher, and for loose aggressive preflop players like me, it can be slightly lower. Make no mistake, my CBET percentage at 58.6 is a leak in my game. This is a report I use to monitor my progress in fixing this leak. As you can see, the report breaks down your CBET percentages by flop high card and flop flush texture. If you order the report by flush texture, by clicking on this button here, you can see whether your CBET percentages differ depending on the flush texture of the board. Generally, a rainbow flop with all different suits is going to be a good board for the preflop raiser, as there is no risk of an opponent drawing to a flush. A two-tone board brings about some danger, and a monotone board the most danger. So your percentages might reflect this danger to some extent. You can see in my own stats that I CBET a bit more often at rainbow flops than at other types of flops, but not much more. I would benefit by CBETting rainbow flops more often, and I can build this into my monthly poker objectives and monitor it using this report. If I click on flop high card here, the report orders itself by flop high card. Obviously an ace-high flop is the best board for a preflop raiser to CBET at. So you would expect percentages to start high and descend downwards. In my stats, you can see this does happen to a small extent, but once again, I could use this information to set myself the objective of increasing my c-bet percentages at boards with high cards. Let's not forget that the name of this report is not c-bet percentage, it is c-bet success, and the main focus for you ought to be the column here. C-bet success versus one opponent. If you successfully isolate to one opponent on the flop, a c-bet of 50% of the pot value only needs to work 33% of the time to show profit. A c-bet of 66% works 40% of the time at a profit, and a total pot size bet will work 50% of the time and show a profit. These are important numbers to be aware of and very easy to remember. Most players don't vary their c-bet sizes, so if you constantly bet half the pot, you know that it only has to work 1 in 3 times. The more money you bet, the more success is required. Personally, I normally bet just over half the pot, but I do vary it on certain boards in certain spots, so I'm looking for a success rate of around 37%. As you can see, I have an overall success rate here of 51.2%. If you're a tighter pre-flop player, this will be considerably higher. But even my relatively modest 51.2% is still hugely profitable. Playing short-handed SNGs as a lag does cause these numbers to drop in comparison with full ring tables. So for most of you, both your c-bet percentage and your c-bet success ought to be higher than mine. Also observe the columns of success against 2 players or more than 2 players. I am often shy to c-bet into 2 players if I have missed the flop, but look how often it works and see how profitable it is. It's usually still a good idea to c-bet into 2 opponents. But if you have more than 2 opponents, you need to have hit the flop in order to bet. Whenever you are making a decision as to whether to c-bet, remember to think about your opponent's likely ranges, how likely they are to have connected with the flop, and their fold to c-bet stats if you have enough data. If you're in doubt, take the gamble, as it is usually profitable. As with all of these reports, you can also add information or remove it by clicking the Stats button over here. You can also access the Select Report Stats menu by right-clicking anywhere and choosing Report Statistics. I'm just going to centralize this window now and we'll have a look at it in a bit more detail. If you wanted to see how often you make a turn continuation bet and add this to your included stats on the left hand side, you'd select an appropriate menu, so the continuation bet menu here, and then find the stat which is relevant to you. There's a search facility in the top right as well to help you. I found the turn continuation bet stat, so I'm going to highlight it and then click the orange arrow at the bottom of the screen, add stat to report. It then appears in the included statistics. I then want to reposition it within the statistics, so I'm highlighting it and using the up and down arrows very much as we saw when we were looking at the HUD and how to set up the HUD in the first 2 videos. And I'm going to position mine here underneath the flop continuation bet, and then I'm going to click on OK and wait for the report to refresh. As you can see, my turn continuation bet percentage is 56.7%, which I'm reasonably happy with. For most players, this should sit somewhere between 40 and 60. A lot depends on your pre-flop and flop activity. Knowing when to make a second bet at the turn is difficult, but in general, you should be looking for a high card or a scare card. You should always avoid bluffing a second time if your opponent is loose. Now I want to show you how you can add filters to these reports to streamline the data further. I'm clicking on the More Filters button and I'm just centralizing this window now. This is the More Filters pop-up window with 9 sub-menus on the left-hand side. It seems daunting at first, but it's actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. Whichever sub-menu you happen to be in, the 2 right-hand boxes are always visible. So you can see at a glance which filters are currently applied, and you have access to the quick filters at the bottom here. I'm going to add a quick filter. Let's make sure I'm the pre-flop raiser by adding this filter here. To do this, I highlight the quick filter I want and press the green plus arrow here. I can see in the applied filters that this is now applied. I don't want to filter for tournament type, so I'm going to change the submenu now and select basic filters. You should be using these a lot. In the top part of the screen, you can filter by site, stakes, and also importantly, the number of players in the hand. Note that this is not the number of players in the tournament, but the number of players in the hand. I'd like to see how well my c-bets do in heads-up situations. So I'm going to filter this now to between 2 and 2. Note that immediately appears in the applied filters. Green plus arrow is not necessary for this section. In the middle section, you can see how easy it is to filter by position on the table, both your own position and your opponent's. I do want to filter by position, and I could choose to do this here, but there is an easier place to do this. In the bottom section under relative position, I'm going to choose in position. This automatically puts me as the button against the big blind in a heads-up situation. Note that some of the filters in the third section are also available as quick filters. I want to add one final filter. I want to see how often I fire a turn c-bet when an ace or a king hits the turn as a high card. To do this, I need to select the board texture submenu here. Then unselect the flop and the river so that I'm just looking at available filters for when the street is the turn. I can see here there's an option for custom ranking the turn card. So I can now choose exactly what the turn card is. At the bottom here, ace equal to or between an ace and a king. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to now hit the green plus arrow. Don't forget to do that. And now in the right hand box, you can see clearly I've got 4 filters on. I'm the pre-flop raiser, I'm in position, there's 2 players in the hand, and the turn card is an ace or a king. Wonderful. If you want to save filter selections, you can do so either just in each sub-menu for any particular combinations you enjoy in the sub-menus. They've all got this save button at the bottom of the sub-menus. Personally, I've never bothered with this as it takes very little time to apply filters once you know what you're doing. And anyway, there's a much neater place to do your filter saving, and that's in the top right corner here. You're much better advised to do the saving here. It makes a lot more sense to me. It's pretty self-explanatory to do and useful if you don't want to forget a filter combination. Okay, let's now click on OK and look at the data that I've got. I'm not concerned with the flop c-bet percentage stats here, as this data is filtered so that the turn card is seen 100% of the time. So any c-bets at the flop have already failed. I'm interested in the turn c-bet percentage, and I'm horrified that it's only 55.2%. Normally, I should be betting and representing that high card on the turn. So what I could do now is, for example, look at all the hands. Where I've got a queen high rainbow flop. So let's go here, queen high rainbow flop, and you can see that there's 39 examples of those hands at the bottom. I could now replay all of these hands in the replayer by right-clicking on one of the hands and selecting Replay All like this. The replayer appears. I've got 39 hands to go through, and I can work out why I've not made a turn continuation bet. What I've effectively done is just built myself a short coaching session using the reports and filters. I've just cleared the filters, and now I'm going to go to the More Reports and load up the overall report. The overall report is the most raw, unfiltered data from all your tournaments. You can add in any stat onto this and it will provide you with as much information as you've got in your database on that particular stat. It's quite useful for getting a glimpse, but it's not really the place to come for specifics. It doesn't do anything also that the next report doesn't do. For that reason, I'm not going to spend long on it. Whilst I am here, let me show you a button that is constantly available at the bottom of the screen. The results graph, which is this bar chart icon here. This shows you if you're a winning or losing player, and it breaks the information down into showdown and non-showdown situations. As with a lot of winning players, I'm losing money in non-showdown situations, in the red here, but winning in the showdown situations in blue. The net amount won is displayed here. I've got it displayed as big blinds per 100 hands. You can change that in the options to just pure winnings, and you can look at the yellow charts your expected winnings, and the green is your actual net won. So you can see if you were looking at a more streamlined amount of data, the green and the yellow would show you whether you're running lucky or not. You can see for a while there my green line's below my yellow, which means I'm running unlucky, and when the green goes above the yellow, that means you're running lucky. In the long run, these two are going to even out. So let's close that now and open up the position report. The position report is easily my favorite report. I use this constantly with my students to look at how well they're doing. I think that the display of the core stats broken down by position gives you a fantastic picture of what a player is doing right and wrong. So as you can see, it's broken down by small blind, big blind, early position, mid position, cutoff, and button. The column headers can be single clicked to sort by that particular column. So if I click on preflop raise, the data is reordered in ascending order of preflop raise. Clicking it again reverses the order, and clicking on the position column here would then bring it back to the default. If I right click on any column header, this menu comes up which allows us to deselect any of the stats on this report, and they would then be hidden from view. It's kind of an alternative to removing the stats altogether in the select report stats box here. You could remove them altogether. This way it temporarily hides them from view, and you can then just reselect them if you wanted to look at them again. Quite neat. Remember, all my stats are for 6 max games. They are going to look a lot different to full ring play. Despite that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the core stats in the different positions. From early position, which doesn't really exist in 6 max play, the under the gun position in 6 max play is classified as early position, but it's early mid position. Nevertheless, from early position, you're going to want tight VPIP and preflop raise stats. If yours are something around 9% and 7%, that's really nice and tight. I personally like to limp with a lot of low and medium pairs when I'm deep stacked, so I do limp a bit more than most people. But whether you prefer limping or raising, you should still be playing a really tight range. If you play low stakes, limping with pairs is quite profitable, as you tend to get well paid when you hit a set. From mid position, my stats are 17 and 9, which is okay, but I could probably go in raising a slightly higher percentage of the time. An average player will generally want to play a slightly tighter range from middle position, though the nearer you are to the button, the looser you can play. From the cutoff, my stats are 18.5 and 13, and the button 23 and 19. I'm reasonably content with these, though if I filter for this year, you'll see I have been getting more aggressive from the cutoff and button, which is something that I've actively targeted myself to achieve since using Hold'em Manager. Remember, these two positions are by far the most profitable on the table. Most of the money you make comes from these positions, and it makes sense to play more hands, even if it takes you outside your comfort zone. Raising 25% of your hands from the button is by no means a silly target. In fact, it's perfectly healthy. From the small blind, my VPIP is rather too high. If I just bring the date range back to all dates, it's actually 48.7 for all dates. It's a bit too high. I'm not really losing money or much money from this position, so I'm happy. This data includes a lot of heads up hands, so the figures for the blinds will look high. My big blind stats are quite loose, but I'm a good player from this position, so I'm comfortable being slightly loose. Your exact VPIP and pre-flop raise stats, they will depend a lot on your overall playing style, but make sure you use this report to monitor your positional awareness. Try and keep your button and cutoff percentages high and your big blind and early position stats low. The VPIP and pre-flop raise stats don't tell you how well you are performing in each position, and for multi-tournament players the net 1 figures won't tell you much either, as these figures tend to get warped by huge hands. The most useful stat for monitoring your performance is this one, the big blinds per 100 hands. Multi-tournament players have to cope with enormous variance, and this can be very challenging. Mentally, you need to stay strong. Your big blinds 1 per 100 hands will tell you whether you're performing playing good poker in a way that other stats just won't be able to do. If you will understand this, this can be a very comforting stat during hard times. If it's positive in green, you're doing well. Negative in red, not so well. If it's more than 3, that's great. So at the bottom here, mine's 7. If it's more than 7, you're doing really well, and if it's considerably more than that, that's incredible. Once again, the cutoff and the button are the places where it should be best, and you're likely to be losing money on the blinds. Actually, -12 from the big blind is really not too bad at all. It's difficult. You're likely to be losing a lot in full ring games. It's likely to be -20 because you're playing against tighter raises, so it makes more sense giving up your blind when you're playing full ring than it does playing 6 max, and that's why it's possible to achieve better results from the big blind in short-handed games. If it looks like you have a particular weakness in any one position, that's often a good place to begin deeper analysis. Let's say you felt your performance was weak from the big blind. You could then look at your VPIP, pre-flop raise, 3-bet, big blind fold to steal stats, and you could see if there was any obvious reasons why your performance is not good. If your VPIP is too high, your fold to steal too low, you might be defending your blind too often. I'm folding 72% of the time, which is very low. Unless you're an amazing post-flop player, you don't really want it much lower than that. Also, check your 3-bet stats. They should be high from the big blind, as you need to fight back against steals, especially in multi-tournaments. This might be 10, 11, 12.
Perhaps you're not re-stealing enough. When you've highlighted something in the stats that you want to know more about, or you've just got a feeling that you want to analyze something specific, define what it is and start adding filters. For example, if I found a client calling a bit loose from the big blind too often in deep stack situations, I might do the following. First up, I'm going to filter the stack size for more than 40 big blinds. So I open up the filters, I'll just centralize it for you there, and stack sizes is always inside the tournament filters. You can see there's 3 here: stack size in big blinds, and effective stack. I'm going to go for greater than 40 big blinds and click the plus arrow and see it appear here. Next, I'm going to look at the raiser's position. I've decided I only want to look at when the raiser is coming in from early position. I'm not concerned so much if my client is calling a bit loose from button raisers, so let's just filter out all of these other positions and just look at early raisers. We're facing an early position raiser. Notice that you can also do this for 3-betters and limpers. I am then going to filter by actions, so I'm going to come to the 7th submenu here, because I want my pre-flop action to be a call. So it's just going to be call like this, select, and finally I've decided that I'm happy for my client to call with pocket pairs and ace king. I think that those hands, it's okay to set mine deep stacked and to maybe have a flop with ace king. Could re-raise of course with ace king, but let's say we're happy with these situations. So the whole cards menu, submenu here, is the 3rd one. When you enter it, they're all selected. You can see the select all, select none. I can do that, select all. What I really want to do is turn off the pocket pairs, so I come here, click off, and I'm going to turn off ace king manually by clicking on them once. If you click on them again, that reselects them, and that's it. I think I'm happy with that search. So I'm looking for stack size in big blinds greater than 40, early position raiser, pre-flop action. I'm going to call, and my whole cards are going to be the ones highlighted. Click on OK. Wait for that to take effect. As you can see on the orange bar across the middle, this is the filter that we've applied, and you can see that returns on the big blind 216 hands. I'm doing really well. I'm making money in these situations, so I'm very happy with my performance. Most players would not be doing so well and would benefit from going through the hands that this search returns as a personal coaching session, looking for ways that you can conserve chips. As it happens, my performance is much worse from the small blind, and believe me, this type of thing happens really often when you're playing around with filters. I started off wanting to analyze one thing, and I've just stumbled on something completely different. If I scan down these hands at the bottom, I can already see there's a couple of ace-10 offsuits, jack-queen offsuit. What was I thinking calling out of position with hands this week? I could go through these hands in the replayer, learn what I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm overplaying suited connectors, maybe I should be re-raising pre-flop instead of calling, maybe I should have just been folding. The answer lies in these 122 hands that I've got here. What a great coaching session that would make for me. Okay, I've just cleared off those filters by using the clear filters button, and I know a lot of you will still be feeling quite daunted by those filters, but don't worry, I'm going to do much more work on them in the next video. Let's conclude this part of the series by looking at something really simple and really powerful. You should be tracking the improvement of your stats using the date filters. If I simply look at my stats from, say, last year, and I compare them with this year's stats, I'm going to see some improvements, and I want to see how big my improvements are. Last year you can see my total 3-bet was 6.1, my pre-flop raise was 16.8. I've targeted myself to improve and increase those stats, specifically increase the pre-flop raise from the cutoff and button, and the 3-bet, the overall 3-bet percentage. VPIP, I'd kind of like to decrease just a little bit. There are other stats that I've targeted myself to change, but these are some of the core ones. If I now click date range and choose this year, then just wait for that to load up. There we go, very quick. You'll see that my 3-bet percentage has indeed increased. It's not hit the 7% I was aiming for, but it has gone up. Pre-flop raises similarly gone up. VPIP unfortunately has gone up rather than down, so I've got some work to do there still. But I have really got more aggressive from the cutoff and button. So there's a lot of good things that I've achieved. This is useful. You can and should be setting these types of targets probably as monthly objectives, though the timescale would depend on how frequently you play. Having a coach or tutor to help you set and manage smart statistical objectives is a really good idea. In the next video, I'm going to continue by looking at more of the Hold'em Manager 2 reports. My name is Ben Hales. You can find my details at tournamentpokeredge.com. Thank you for watching.